Hello and welcome. You're listening to episode number 52 of the podcast at the Crossroads of the SAFE Network, right here at safecrossroads.net. I'm your host, John Ferguson, the simpleton of Project SAFE, because not everybody can be a geek. I'm certainly not, and most of us aren't. But this is important stuff to talk about, and we don't want just the geeks to have all the fun and know what's going on. Safe Network, secure access for everyone with privacy, security, and freedom. You probably know the drill if you're listening to this, because this is part 2 of a really far-ranging, in-depth interview I had with the founder and chief executive officer of MaidSAFE, David Irvine, and the chief technical officer, Viv Rajkumar. It was a lot of fun. I highly recommend you go back and listen to episode number 51, where we cover the first half of these 21 principles. Actually, they're fundamentals of the SAFE network. We really cover a lot of ground in these 2 episodes. So without further ado, let's listen to the second half. So we'll move on to number 14. The network will rank nodes over time and increased trust in higher ranked nodes. How does that work?
I think this one, the feature that we refer to, node aging, that's where this kicks in. So in terms of trust in higher rank, you can almost translate to meaning how long has somebody been part of the system and performing their expectations or providing their resources and being part of the system in the right way rather than trying various malicious stuff or things that don't help the system or the purpose of the system. So the longer somebody's been serving the purpose, the more trust that they have a lot more trust than somebody that has just recently joined the system. And that entire concept is what node aging conveys, the level of trust that you can place on a person or a node for the time that they've served in the network, classified with the elder groups, the adult groups, the infant groups, and mirrors what David talks about in terms of the natural order as well. So you're not expecting an infant to be responsible for something pretty critical, and how you get there is just based on your experience of doing the right thing.
Right. Boy, it's real easy to slop around and talk about people and so forth, but really we're talking about vault instances where somebody is running that on their computer, but really they have nothing to do with it. It's just,
yes.
unless they are introducing malice, as long as it's there performing as it's expected according to to the network expectations. I just wanted to clarify that because sometimes you can get,
indeed,
it can be confusing to be talking about somebody performing, but it's really just, hey, are you just put it up there and let it run, or are you messing with it?
Indeed.
Cool. And so that actually is a way of making it. This is another Sybil attack vector that's shut off. In other words, you can't just start a whole bunch of nodes. Aside from the fact that the network won't accept them if it doesn't need them, you can't sneak in and get one and get a bunch of them performing well over time. And yeah, I mean, there's so many different aspects of this, but this is just one other level of security.
Indeed, and a big one.
Yes, indeed. Okay, 15, the network will not have servers according to the usual definition of servers. Now, this has kind of been implicit, and we've talked about it, but let's talk about it explicitly from David. I remember hearing some of your explanations of installing these major networks and then trying to secure them and kind of running headlong into this. Let's talk about servers a little bit in terms of a design thing that has become the default.
Yeah, there was a huge actual debate in the forum about these vaults are actually servers and they serve data, and people get away into semantic arguments, which are a bit ludicrous. But really, when we talk about servers and we look at servers through the history of networking, it's a thing that's controlled by a human or some humans, and they give or don't give access to other humans and data contained within it. So a server is generally a thing that does serve data. That's one of the things it does do, but it's completely controlled by set of humans, and they can decide, I'm not going to let you here, I'm going to switch it off, give you no access. Whereas the vaults in the SAFE network are not controlled by any human. If you actually try and mess about with your vault, the network would see it as malice and kick your fault off, take that away. So they do serve data, but they're not servers in the sense of the word that we are used to, which is a computer that lots of people attach to and may or may not get access to. So they do serve data, but they're not traditional servers.
Right. That's pretty obvious when you start looking at even what we've talked about so far, but it needed to be addressed because I've seen and actually probably even participated in some of those debates. Like, oh, don't be silly. No, this is very different.
People can be silly, it's like saying everything's marketing or everything's PR, or anybody that trots to the shops is an Olympic athlete, and it gets a bit daft. So one of the things about humans and the way that we communicate and interact, and even maths, everything's within limits. Everything that we discuss and whatnot's within limits. And when we talk about this network will have no servers, what we really mean is there is nobody or no group of people sitting somewhere that can control another group of people in the network.
Right. And that runs into just the concept of how the internet is constructed so far is just so, over the last number of years, has become so solidly server-based that it's really hard for people to think outside of that box. I know it has been difficult for me, and I'm not even not even at that level of designing it. So
I think it's a lot to do with laziness. We abdicated responsibility. When I did at the very start of the internet as well, I used CompuServe and things because it was just easier. And it's one of whether you're socialist or Republican or Democrat, or whatever these labels are that people give to people, it's one of the failings, I think, when you've got a profit-based system that people will seek profits beyond anything. And if you get like Google or Yahoo or all these kind of companies, and you say to them, get profit, that's your job. And if you don't get profit, you'll actually go to jail for being a bad director. These people are going to do things that will get them profit. If you've got a system like SAFE, then you're saying, well, the vision of it is completely different and it's not profit driven. And I think that's quite essential.
Well, that is part of why this is a unique project in terms of the thoroughgoingness of what it takes to deliver. It's exceptional to find people like yourself that'll drive this forward going, you'll probably profit in the end, but just because you're knowledgeable and you're the most knowledgeable about this and so forth. But that's not the motivation. You'd have had plenty of other ways to make profit. But even aside from that, there's technical reasons why it kind of evolved that way as well and became easy to do. So
it was difficult to encrypt data. At that time when servers came about, people weren't really thinking about hackers or people controlling data. And I'm sure when Google started out, it was a very admirable thing. Let's index all the information so that people can be more intelligent. But it went the way of servers because servers were there. They worked to an extent. There was lots of problems with it. But we didn't think the problems, or people at that time didn't think the problems would manifest the way they have. And it's not even just profit seeking, because if you're the person in charge of the data and access to it, then you're liable to governments and whatnot knocking on your door saying, give us that information or take this information from people, or, wiretap every single person that goes through your server. So you become part of a political system, which is far removed from the technical system that you intended to provide to people to give them this value.
Right. And that's what I have admired about this from the beginning is this is like creating atmosphere which we can all breathe and nobody can control.
And it's easier if you're more logical, it's easier to sell that to people, I think, because you're giving them just pure value and there's no unintended consequences there. There's no side effects of, oh, by the way, later on we might have to just snoop on you, or we might have to take all your data and delete it, or that's not going to be possible.
Right. All right, well, let's move on to the next one. Number 16, all transactions on the network will be signed digitally. Now, we've got to define what we mean by transactions here so people don't think this is about money, particularly. Viv, maybe you can help us with that one.
Sure. So it's things that operations in the system, essentially. So again, just like the previous point, it's a pretty fundamental point that there are no intermediaries. You're not expecting the system to perform actions, placing trust arbitrarily on other parties than the party involved itself, so the user or the client that's performing that action. And one of the key ways you're doing that is by having things signed digitally that gets you that authentic factor that you require to confirm somebody's identity. So things that happen in the system are purely happening based on the trust and the trust of the identities validated by signatures.
So that even goes down, that goes really down to the basic level of network function between different nodes. I think people really need to understand the number of layers of that's applicable. All transactions, meaning the initial connections and reach to the network is encrypted, and then the data passed is encrypted within that, and then who it's going to is encrypted in there somewhere, so that nobody really sees anything other than just what they are intended to see. I mean, at any level of the software, even.
Indeed.
It also makes actions irrefutable. So if you give me some bad information on the network, or some node gives another node fake information, because it's signed, that you can take that signature and prove to the rest of the network, look, this node's behaving faultily, so let's exclude it.
Oh, there you go.
It's another important aspect to it.
Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't merit spending a lot of time going over that. But the importance of that is really, really big in terms of how the network functions. All transactions on the network will be signed digitally. All right. Number 17, the network will ensure that client-to-client direct messages are free. The network will charge, however, for client-to-client messages involving traversal through the SAFE network. Now, somebody's going to have to really help me understand that better, because honestly, I don't. I have questions about that. So lay it out, and then if I have questions afterwards, I'll ask them.
It's quite simple, actually. It's a lot simpler to say it probably than it is written down. But there's sort of two types of messages, just like there are two types of messages today. So if you have like email today, which would be something going from server to server to server to server, that would be like a message going through the SAFE network, completely through the SAFE network from one user to the other. That would be information that would be charged. However, just like Skype or Google Hangouts and whatnot, there's a lot of systems today where what the intermediary does is just connects the two participants together, and they create their own connection and then speak over it. A lot of them will still snoop on you, but that's what they do, and that's called session establishment or signaling. The SAFE network can provide a secure signaling system for any two people to directly connect their computers together through IP, and those messages will be free. So it's that messages like messaging or like WhatsApp signal type things, they all rely on a server-based solution to get this signaling, which allows the two people to connect. The SAFE network would be one big secure signaling system. So if I wanted to speak to you, John, over the SAFE network, I would say to the SAFE network, I need to get a connection to John, and that would rattle round, get some endpoint information from you, and we would create a secured connection between ourselves. The network backs away at that stage.
Now, that's already been implemented at some point in the test networks of establishing browser-to-browser connections for people to do chats. Basically, we could use a SAFE network to establish a secure video conference that nobody else knows about but us two. That's really what you're saying there, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well,
yeah, and that's
hugely important.
It's very important, and that's done through generally a protocol called STUN. STUN for UDP and TUN for TCP. And so STUN servers, the problem, and that's an old protocol, it's unencrypted, and you have to get to a server that you know, so it's public IP, everybody can track what you're doing. And the SAFE network has a version of STUN which is fully encrypted and doesn't track what you're doing, because anybody can look at the source code and see that it doesn't. And that sounds trivial, but it's actually critical. Because even Signal, which is probably one of the best systems out there, there's still logins, there's still servers, all that sort of stuff. So they have a few issues bumping about trying to not use servers. But it's a really critical point that you shouldn't need ever to provide login information to get access to speak to someone else. And that's what the Safe Network does, free of charge, secure signaling.
Fabulous, fabulous. Now, kind of embedded in this is one question that comes up that we haven't really covered. And I think people need to understand what we mean by charged for. In other words, here's your toll for this particular message. And, that would seem to be kind of unwieldy. I think we need to go back to how SafeCoin interacts with one's ability to put things onto the network in that way. So could you all break that out just for clarity?
Yeah, that's actually as well quite straightforward. So as a participant in the network, a human that's using the network would basically, if you just went up to it as a human and said, can I send some data and store some stuff? And like, well, why would I let you do that? That's not sensible. So the network would request a payment, and that would be, say, a SafeCoin. So a SafeCoin's like 10 cents today. And that would let you store so many gigabytes, terabytes of information and allow you to have like whatever amount of communication, but a significant amount of communication.
I guess that's back to puts and gets, as we talked about earlier. Now, that's going to be an adjustable rate as well. The details of that are not particularly important, but essentially, it boils out of when you need to store data, you need to put data, which would include messages or writing files that you want stored. That comes out of your allotted amount of puts, essentially.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's on your client. When you log in to the network, because if you want to mutate something, you would log in and you would have at least one SafeCoin. The network would take tiny parts of that for data that you store. But in terms of the price of that, because that's always something that people are concerned about, is, how much would that cost? The price of it is actually the network seeks the lowest possible price that any human would take to store that data for you. And what I mean by that is the thing that we discussed earlier on, the network will increase the 0.13 farming rewards and decrease them when it doesn't need services. So what that's saying is the network will pay farmers the least it can for the farmers to exist. And it'll keep dropping the price until farmers start leaving, and then it'll increase it a little bit. So what that's doing is it's saying people will provide resources to the network for the very least amount than anybody on the planet. So if there's 5 folks, say, I'll put my computer on and I want paid 1 cent per year, that'll be the price. And then a user using the network would only be paying a tiny, tiny, tiny amount. If everyone said, I'm only going to put my computer on for £1 million a day, then the network would request that the user pay a huge amount to store data. So what the Safe Network does, it creates a challenge to people who are providing the resources of what's the cheapest you'll provide that for. And it will keep issuing that challenge until it finds the people that will provide that service for the lowest possible cost.
This is a perpetual market. Basically,
it's continuous. Yeah, it's continuous. Every few seconds, the network will be reconfiguring. Almost with every client put or node appearing, it reconfigures the cost. So what we can be sure of is there would be no way of getting the cost cheaper than that.
Wow.
And what you're paying for is you're paying for exactly what you're using, and the network's not taking anything else from you, so it doesn't know that you're John Ferguson and where you live and what your bank balance is. So there's nothing it can take from you except for this SafeCoin payment. So it becomes, again, it's very natural, but it becomes an exceptionally fair system that we don't decide, let's take so much of everybody's payment and we'll just keep it and we'll make the payments this amount or whatever. The network itself is continually calculating.
That's great. Now, again, another tangential on that's related. I think people were going to wonder, well, yeah, but what does it really cost me to be running a vault? And I think that's worth looking at. As far as I can understand, it's really not a big burden. A lot of people like myself are going to run vaults just because, hey, I want to participate. I don't care if it costs me more than I get because, by golly, this is important for everybody. But what's it going to cost people to participate as providing network resources?
Yeah, there'll be a cost, but it's not going to be an exorbitant cost. It's not a proof of work type system, so your computer isn't going to be sitting whirring away trying to do stuff that it doesn't need to be doing. So your computer will be doing exactly the minimum that the network requires it to do. So it might have to reply to a piece of data request or whatever. But it's not going to, we don't envisage these nodes to be sitting going like CPU crazy or whatever. They will use bandwidth, that how much we don't know until the network's actually in use, but the more the better, because it makes the network stronger. And bandwidth's one of those things that we don't worry too much about because it's increasing faster than Moore's law. So it'll use bandwidth, it'll use some storage. Storage is actually increasing probably faster than Moore's law as well. That, computers can store, like Samsung's talk about a terabyte phone now.
Right.
And there's crystals that can hold apparently the whole of the world's data. And that's another important thing. It's not really just about holding the data that the safe network does. They'll hold the data forever, because if everybody could hold all of the world's data, you would still need the safe network, because that data moves forward. Right. It's updated, it's changed, there's new inventions. So the cost, and back to your original point, before I do my double glazing salesman, the cost should be relatively minimal in terms of CPU usage. It should be within bounds that you set for the disk usage. And as of yet, we don't know in terms of the bandwidth usage, but certainly in a lot of parts of the world, which I don't understand why the United States is a bit different, but many parts of the world don't have bandwidth caps. Some parts do have bandwidth caps, and that's something that we have to be careful of, that the nodes don't go past people's bandwidth cap, which we doubt they will, but as I say, we'll always be monitoring that. And if they did start going near bandwidth caps, then that would be the network saying, I need more nodes in more parts of the world, and it would bring some more in.
Cool. So one thing related to this that that hadn't been said, that's been put there since the very early things, is this is being designed for people to contribute spare resources. In other words, yeah. Hey, you've got bandwidth, you've got your storage, you have your computer, and this should be able to run in the background without burdening your resources terribly. That is the design. We'll see how all the details work out, but cool.
Yeah, all no right. Data centers should be left after this.
Yes, ultimately. You can have data centers if you want,
Yeah.
You can use the data centers to run your farming software.
Yeah, they make great targets for bombers.
Exactly. All right, well, let's go on here. This is number 18. The network will not use any ClearNet service. Well, let's define ClearNet, and then why is that important? And how does the Safe browser work into that, and all that stuff?
Sure. I think compared to the previous one, this one will be a whole lot simpler. So in terms of what we mean by ClearNet, or ClearNet here is what we have right now in terms of what you're using, how you're communicating with the existing infrastructure that we have in the networking layer with the servers, the Googles and the corporations. Put a lot of it together. So things that we are having right now, if we term that as ClearNet services that we're using, like even to the extent of the examples that David was mentioning, like what we do for Stun right now for services of WebRTC and things like that. And then what we're saying with the network is the network shouldn't be relying on any such ClearNet service, just from, again, the security perspective of how identities are associated to the address space, how they're not connected to the geographic distance in terms of the privacy and the freedom, especially. Being detached to that ClearNet service keeps information self-contained and self-reliant, so the network's not having an exit point or an entry point from the outside for tampering or interfering with the information maintained in the system itself.
Cool. Yeah, that's how does the Safe browser work in that? Some people go, well, why do you have this separate browser that is blah, 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 blah. Could you break that out? I think that's really important. And how is that going to interact with, or how will people use that?
Sure. So again, just in that same perspective, the Safe browser, like what we've tested with the community as well, is used to access information in the network. So the browser doesn't go to google.co.uk or things like that. So, and we played about with a few alternatives from the past about building plugins into current existing browsers, And you're always into the territory of compromises because those browsers are owned by other companies. There's data sharing that happens between the various tabs or the websites that you're visiting and that entire ecosystem. So if you're talking about having your privacy and your security maintained, what is the channel by which you're providing it? So the browser that's being built from the infrastructure of the system itself is getting you that information without compromising the security from that aspect, but it lets you access everything like what you'd expect from any other traditional browser.
I think it probably is appropriate to point out that it's this is an open source thing, so anybody could develop a browser that would interact with the SAFE network and also work with a plugin if they wanted to go that way, correctly? Yeah, I mean, not that would be a good idea, but they could do that if that's their preference, right?
Oh, indeed, that's where the freedom comes in. So this isn't something you've got gatekeepers saying this is how you got to live your life. You could very well choose how you want to live your life. And the network's just making sure that everybody gets to make their own choices.
Right. So the SAFE browser is being developed with that in mind. Okay, good. Well, we're rocking along here. Number 19, the network will never use time as a network tool, although nodes may use local durations. That's an interesting one.
David loves this one.
Yeah, this is one of my very early things with the network, that time as a measurement is a ridiculous, unscalable thing to use, and it's not natural. It's a completely unnatural way to work. So the network and natural systems work very much in an event-driven world. Something happens and you react to that, and that's how things operate. There's quite a lot of systems where time is used as we'll do this and 10 seconds later we'll expect this other thing's happened over here, and then 14 seconds after. They generally don't work, and if they do work they won't scale. And it's one of those things that I think developers pick up and think, oh, we'll put a timestamp here and we'll put a timestamp there and we'll do various things with these timestamps, and it just leads into black holes of complete confusion.
Well, technically, why is that technically? I mean, really, if when you come right down to it, it seems like, at least in our modern age, time is the most natural thing. It's what ties us all together, and this, that, and the other. What do you mean? How does that implement?
Yeah, time when you're designing things is quite a terrible thing. So if you say, for instance, I want to send this message from here to here, that should take 2 seconds and I should get a reply in another 2. So after 4 seconds, if something hasn't happened, I'll send it again. But then the network grows and the number of hops you're going to cross is 3 times the number previously that you had. And then you have to say, all right, I need to change that 2 seconds to 6 seconds or 7 seconds. And that's where you get the problem of scalability and time. The other problems that you have is who says what time it is. So
right. That seems like the big one right there.
Yeah, who agrees on what time it is? So all the computers should maybe go to a time server or something, but who owns the time server? So that those things all become tricky. But the fact that it's quite tricky to get time from a secure location, to me, is actually very good, because it's a much easier way for me to say, don't be using that man-made construct of time, which is very unnatural. And I think we're the only, unless we find some more species out in space somewhere, I think we're the only ones that actually wear watches and do things based on it. So, and a lot of other species seem to go on quite well without having a Rolex. So it actually is a really unnatural way to design anything when you assume that a certain period of something that's not related to what's happening in the network has passed, because what's happening in the network could have completely changed. Like maybe the network started segmenting, maybe it started growing, maybe it started shrinking. How does your time measurement take into account all these different things that could be happening at any time? So if you then base all of your design on reacting to things that are actually happening in real time, then you'll work at the fastest possible speed of the network. So rather than waiting 2 seconds for this reply, you do something when the reply comes back. The reply might come back in a millisecond. So you're not waiting for that extra 1.9 seconds or 1.99 seconds. You're waiting just for that millisecond. So if you take time away from designers and say you're not allowed to use that, now you have to design a natural system which will work as fast as it possibly can, then you end up with a significantly more powerful network.
Cool. That's sufficient in itself on that, but it raises a question that I was looking at just now, and this is a good place to introduce it because it's not unrelated, is the matter of consensus. This is not taken up anywhere here, but it's actually really important, especially, for so many reasons. How do you achieve consensus within this framework of not having time and interactions and all these various transactions? And I don't know how deep of a dive technically that's going to be, but let's talk about that right here.
Well, I think and consensus is an interesting thing, because if you look at consensus algorithms, the asynchronous consensus algorithms are the holy grail. Fully asynchronous consensus algorithms are thought to be impossible, but that's been disproven by us and many other people.
Could you define what an asynchronous algorithm is?
And asynchronous is something that's not using time. So synchronous systems tend to, something should happen within a certain period. If it's not happened within that period, do something else, make another decision. Those are very weak protocols, and there's, you'll find it's not synchronous consensus algorithms like cryptocurrencies behind them. So an asynchronous consensus algorithm is, a lot of them are based on graphs, like directed acyclic graphs, and you're looking at the graph to see who has said what and who previously had said what before them, and what can you prove from it. So you build this graph up, and the nodes that are voting or making assertions that they want to be clarified through consensus don't wait on anything. They just immediately do that vote, and then the other nodes immediately, when they see that vote, will forward it or whatever. There's no waiting period or saying, oh, I have to wait for a few seconds to see if this person here is going to speak, and then if he doesn't, I'll speak.
This basically, just to interject here for clarity, basically what you're talking about here is time is as perceived in sequences by everybody individually, and then how those interact to come to a consensus is a sequential set of circumstances rather than anything based on an external measure. Is that safe to say?
It is. So basically we design things. So like a directed acyclic graph is quite a good example of entropy. So entropy only goes one direction. It can only go forward, and it will go forward at the speed of all the participants. And that's roughly what we think time is. It's something, but except we put it in a period, which is this time period, which is kind of bizarre, because the world's doing what the world's doing, and we're saying, oh, it can't be dark just now, my clock says 5, and why is the sun going away? Well, the sun just is. So these graphs and whatnot are a good example of entropy. They go forward through these durations and whatever long it takes, but the durations, rather than 5 minutes, could be 5,000 transactions, or it could be 5 transactions, and that's how they move, but they can't go backwards. So they're very much like the kind of Sean Carroll arrow of time approach. So it's an increasing entropy.
Cool. Well, that is really an interesting view, and that doesn't discount the usefulness of time to us as humans in coordinating our actions. But on a network level, it's kind of like we've taken our human experience and forced that in kind of an unnatural way on our computer interactions. And what you're doing with the Parsec protocol, for instance, is to basically reverse that process so the network can function as itself, and we can deal with time amongst ourselves as we want to, but it's not enforced on the network.
No, that's correct.
Cool. Well, we've dealt with that. Exploring Parsec is really fascinating. I recommend anybody who's interested in consensus to do it. But I realized we hadn't even been mentioned yet, and it just kind of had to, and that was a good time to do it. We pretty well covered on that time point and consensus point?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Okay, good deal. Let's move on. 20. The network will only ever use encrypted services and encrypted traffic. Now, we've kind of covered this, but whenever this topic comes up, I go back to Renee Van de Polder's post on the Safe Network called The Layers of Encryption. And I'm going to link that in the show notes. It's a wonderful breakout that gives a picture of just how the different layers of encryption make things so obscure. What do you have to say about that?
Again, it comes down to the simplicity. So any communication, any interaction that users of the system are having, or the nodes even autonomously having between each other, are encrypted. So in terms of man-in-the-middle attacks, Crust has secure serialization, which even hop-to-hop, even people at the next hop wouldn't be utilizing the same mechanisms as far as the first hop is concerned. Messages that are going at the routing layer, like what you're talking about there, that has its own signature validation and services that you're using to have that information relayed across the address space. Once it gets to the walls would even obfuscate chunks that they're storing themselves. So each layer of the system utilizes means in terms of the services that they're using and how they're dealing with the traffic in the system, with encryption used in multiple stages. So you're not leaving things to just plain text, and there isn't an exception to the rule across the stack.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I envision it as Russian dolls. The one in type is sending. I'm sending this message, and I'm going to put it in a wrapper, and it gets put in wrappers, and then it gets unwrapped at the other end, and Indeed. Nobody in between understands anything except the thing that's specifically relevant to what they are supposed to do with the data. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. I'm going to link that post in the show notes because it's a really good mental image. All right. Well, goodness gracious, we're arriving at number 21. And this one, well, I'll read it and then I'll give my thoughts and get reaction. The network will allow real-time upgrades in a secure manner, i.e. the network will refuse upgrades that could break it. Now, that seems like a really tall order to me. And I'll be honest, this is one thing I haven't approached, and we may need to do a whole episode on this at some point, because it seems like such a challenge. Even Bitcoin, which is pretty cool in terms of who participates, there still are just a certain number of people that hold the keys to doing upgrades. How do we work that out, David? This is one that has puzzled me, and I've had faith. And how far along are we on actually developing that?
Yeah, upgrades, even without the upgrades we are talking about, where the network will validate them, upgrades in all of these decentralized networks are critical components. Now, Algorand said a thing about the Avalanche crew recently. I was asking them on Twitter and some other people, when you've got a network of nodes that are running and the nodes are providing consensus through messaging, and it's a permissionless network, upgrades are a process that not many people are talking about, and I'm trying to engage and get a conversation with other projects that it's a very, very tricky thing. Now, we're at the point where, as we finish Parsec, upgrades and network restarts are a big component for us. We know we can do that with the Crust network. Routing network is going to be a bit more work. But here, what we're talking about is where the network will actually say, I'm not accepting that upgrade. And I think this is critical for complete decentralization. I said decentralizing us, MaidSAFE as a company as well. And the process there is pretty straightforward if you think about it in terms of the nodes or the vaults are elders or adults or infants. So they've got this age component, so that lets them know that they're getting better, lets the network know that node's becoming more trustworthy. So if you've got a node running and it's an elder, it's got an age of 100 or whatever, and an upgrade comes along, one of the nice features of the Safe network and networks like this that you can do, or probably most decentralized networks can do this, but they don't talk about it. Start the node right beside the node that's running. So your elder node of 100 will start this baby node of age 3. Our nodes start at 3. And just monitor it and see, does it grow? Is it moving between sections? Is it storing all the data? And if it's doing that job properly and well, and compared with yourself, if it's doing it better, the elder can just give its keys to that node and restart it and kill its own self. So the network there is actually self-validating. It's saying all of the nodes will check the upgrade, run them in parallel, see they're doing just as good a job as them, they should be doing better. And if so, then accept the upgrade. And it's a bit more complex than that. I'm simplifying it hugely here. But
I don't doubt that it's a lot more complicated. That blows my mind, actually, right there.
Yeah, but that's the idea, that the network itself, and there could be some AI components to this. I suspect that there will be some AI components to this, but for true decentralization, I think this is what's going to have to happen, is that you have things like that's one of the reasons we get the network fundamentals is if an upgrade is doing what those fundamentals are saying should be getting done, and it's doing them better than your existing node, you should upgrade to it. So we need to cover everything with those fundamentals so that anyone following these rules is doing what exactly we want for the safe network to do. And if they are, we'll accept the code.
Wow. Now, that really is a subject that could be gone into in depth. And I've been shy on it. And like you say, it looks like other networks are being shy on discussing that as well, because it's a major point. So that ends the list here. And that actually is a really good place to kind of go back over the question. The kind of the series of questions I said to have in mind at the beginning is like, well, where are we at actually on implementing these things? What's really done and what's left to be done? I know that obviously this last one is going to take a considerable amount of effort to fully fulfill.
Yeah, well, I'm very much an optimist, and Viv's very much the realist. So we could fly through these, and I'll say what I think is done, and if there's anything that Viv thinks is left in those parts, then he'll do as usual and punch me in the face.
Well, it's good to know that there's a bit of an adversarial relationship going on there.
Yeah. I've always got my trainers on in this office, my running shoes ready. But we can just fly through them. So fundamental one, the network will allow a person to create an account and log in. That has been done and proven in test networks.
Good.
Number two, the network will allow users to securely share information and messages. That has been done in test networks. However, vaults from home comes into play there. We've shown that previously, but there was some things in routing we had to secure. Alpha 3 will show the secure routing thing, and then we'll reintroduce that. But we've already shown it. Number 3, the network must allow SafeCoin is not in play yet. Number 4, the network will allow users to anonymously create shared data. That's been proven already through previous test nets, but we still have to bring that out in Alpha 4 again, because we're making some slight changes to data type there. So we've shown that we can do that with a data type, but we're altering that again to make it better. Number 5, network will allow anyone to browse content anonymously free of charge. So that's been shown. That's done. Number 6, the network will allow users to associate multiple identities. That's not been done, basically because we never enabled it. That multiple identity thing is not an enormous job, though. It's not like a problem we have to solve.
Yeah, that's just more of a implementation details rather than a critical problem. Good.
Absolutely. So number 7, the network will allow users to use any of their identities to send and receive SafeCoin. That's linked to that previous one, so no, we've not shown that yet. The network will store data in perpetuity. It will, but we keep switching it off at the moment because we're going through tests.
Right.
But yeah,
right.
There's nothing in the network to lose data or delete data. So that's been shown.
It's been shown that it can be done. It's just not being attempted at this point because the networks the network is evolving in terms of development. Okay.
Yeah. Number 9, the network will never require passwords to be shown to be stored on either the machine or the network, and that's been shown for sure because we just don't allow that. Number 10, the network will allow any user on any machine access to it and leave no trace. That's been shown to an extent just now, but we need to make sure that that's like absolute because there's things like memory wiping and stuff. But yeah, all of the rules and code and whatnot are in place to make that happen.
Good.
Number 11, Network scrub all IP addresses. That's done. That's been shown. Number 12, network will only accept more vaults when it needs them. That's not yet been shown or finalised in design. It's not a huge thing in design, but it's still not been finalised.
It's being worked with, though, in terms of conceptual and implementation. It's just not done. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
We don't see it as a problem.
Okay.
It's a bit like
it's the right in its own time and place. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Number 13, the network will increase farming rewards when it needs more. That's only in an RFC at the moment. It's not been in code. An RFC will have to be updated.
And RFC being request for comment, that's part of the process of actually taking an idea and presenting it and then working it over and then implementing. Okay.
Very much like the Bitcoin improvement process. So
Sure.
Number 14, the network will rank nodes over time and increase trust in higher ranked nodes. That code is going in just now. We're running quite a lot of simulations on that to confirm that. Number 15, the network will not have servers. It still doesn't. That's good. So that's been shown. All transactions will be signed digitally.
No, I just got to say, people are going to say, oh, but it's all running on servers right now. But that's just a test network where you actually have individual separate instances running as if they're running from home. It's just they're running on servers for convenience and something to continue developing against. Okay, I just wanted to put that in there. Okay.
Interestingly, not all the malice stuff that we're currently coded is in Alpha 2. However, if it wasn't Alpha 2, even though that was running a DigitalOcean servers, if we started mucking about with one, the rest of the network would kill it.
Good.
So they're not things we can control.
Cool.
Number 16, transactions signed digitally. Yes, that's been done and shown. 17, the network will ensure that client-to-client. We've shown that as proof of concept work. We've got the code, we know it works, but we've still got to package it and release it properly with the network.
Good.
Number 18, network will not use any ClearNet service. That's, again, fundamental. It won't ever do that. Number 19, the network will never use time. It won't. It's been an argument I've had for a long time, but it won't.
Oh, is that a point of contention between the two of you guys?
No.
Okay, I was wondering. I thought, that would seem odd.
Somebody described this project. In fact, a guy works here, but he was describing it to his friends, saying, "This is an amazing idea David's got, but he keeps going on about time. I'm worried about his sanity."
Okay, good. Well, your audaciousness is part of what has brought us this far, so I'm okay with that.
Absolutely. Number 20, the network will only ever use encrypted. Yep, that's what we do. That's another fundamental operation. Number 21, I wish we had that completed. We've got some basic ideas. As I say, we're able to update the CrustNet or restart the Crust network. We're not convinced yet on a really solid mechanism for restarting the whole network, but that's something that's currently being worked on. That, I would say, is probably, I don't know if I would, again, I'm tying up my laces here, but I would say that's the last of the big problems that we have to solve in the network, is upgrades.
In terms of big problems, sure.
Yeah.
But boy, that's not unusual. I don't know of any network that has ever had the audacity to approach that.
No.
So
no.
But even without that, the network is pretty solid. It could run, but I think that's a really important one for the perpetuity of the network.
Yeah, well, that's it. Unless we can code 100% efficiently with no bugs whatsoever and no new algorithms come out to improve anything, we're going to have to upgrade it.
Right. Well, exactly. But the means by which it's upgraded and who to trust with that, or whether the network can itself be trusted with that, that's a huge question. And
100%, John.
Yeah. 100%.
So we don't want people to trust us. We do want people to trust us, but we don't.
But you don't want them to have to.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want that.
You want to be trustworthy, but you don't want to be. You don't want that burden either, for everybody's sake. Well, exactly. Excellent. Now, this is a set of really cool principles. Now, they apply specifically to the SAFE network, but in our talk between things, I think you had something to say about this as a list of principles more broadly than the SAFE network. How would you frame that up?
I think, to me, we've got a vision. When I look at a lot of projects, a lot of projects lack vision, and by that I mean don't sit in Google for an afternoon and say this sounds good, but actually a target that you're aiming for. So whether that's curing cancer or whatever it is, have a vision, have a strong vision, and that's good because people can look at that vision, privacy, security, freedom that we've got, and say that sounds really nice and warm and cuddly. But really, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? And that's where the network fundamentals, I think, come in. Say we're going to supply a service that's going to have these fundamental components, and they're not up for debate. And this is something that I would like to see other projects, so that we can collaborate with projects which have got the same fundamentals, or even share some fundamentals, maybe not them all, with us. So we can say, for instance, this network will never prevent a person from logging in or creating an account or whatever. It'll never snoop in people. And then other people might say, we want to snoop in people because we want to stop paedophiles, or we want to stop criminals. And we can say there's no point in collaborating with us because that fundamental is in opposition to ours, so we can't collaborate. And it would be a way for projects to collaborate, but it would also be a way for people who are looking at projects to say, I don't really understand the technology, I don't really understand what they're doing, I don't know when they're going to be finished, but I totally agree with these fundamentals, or I vehemently disagree with them and I'm not going to support this project, just so that there's much less fluff, much less confusion, and there's a much simpler path into, which is the Safe Network is quite a complex proposition, but at least if you know, if it's following these fundamental, if that vision I believe in, it sounds like a nice vision, but if the network's following these fundamental rules, then I'm going to support it. If it changes any of them, I want to know about it, and I may not support it at that point. So I don't need to be an engineer, I don't need to be a PhD, but I do need to be a person that has a network that follows these fundamentals, because that's what I've bought into. And I think that's a critical thing that's missing from the whole area just now, because we look at other projects and we hope, like POA Network is something that we've been working with some of their code recently, and they're really good. It'd be great to have a lot more collaboration in the space, but I think every project just needs to be a bit more upfront about what is its fundamental principles that it's going to deliver on.
Well, this is a very explicit set of principles, and I really appreciate it. And that's one of the things I've admired about you and the project all along, is that hugeness of vision and the audacity to reach for it. And it's very impressive how far along it's gotten. And so thank you all, both of you, so much. This has been a great exploration that I've really wanted to do for a long time, and finally found a way to do it. So thank you. And let's see, is there anything else you want to say to folks before we sign off, either one of you?
Yeah, I think just you're saying that I've got the audaciousness to move things forward, but I think we need to sort of put it down to Viv. He's the one that's making this stuff happen, because I can't manage people. I'm terrible at managing people. So he's the one that's, when he's not punching me in the face, he's punching other people to make them code.
These
so
are the things I disagree with.
He's the guy that's bringing this over the line just now, and that's why the project's changed significantly in the last 2 years, where delivery has been a lot more sure and certain.
I totally disagree.
I know this.
That's what you're there for, Viv. Somebody's got to check this,
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Music for this episode is written and performed by Nicholas Koteskey of Two-Faced Heroes. Thanks a lot, Nick. And I really want to thank MaidSAFE for sponsoring this podcast and making it more possible to get you the lowdown on what's going on. Thanks all the crew at MaidSAFE.